Stop work, pens down. All right, I hope you have your answers in your heads because I'm going to come around and look. How many put beautiful after the definite article, the Or what would you bring first? Pardon? New? Does everybody agree? Okay. What are the dissenting views? So some people are saying a new, some people are saying a big. You see, this is what the fanatics will call brofu yedru. English is not the easiest of languages. So which one will come next? A new, beautiful, big, white. Really? Does everybody agree? Exactly, I knew that. So one of the things I've also tried to do, and a colleague of mine and I supervise a graduate student who tried to look at this also for Akan. And this work is reported in Pokia, Osam and Sa 2007. It's the initial work. There is more work to be done about that. But those of you who have some knowledge about Akan, if you don't have any knowledge of Akan, but you speak some other Ghanaian language, Ga, Ebe, Nzima, Dagomba, Buli, Farafara, Konkomba, Nchumuru, Achode, Sandro Kofi, and a whole host of them. So for the Akan speakers, so the rest of you, I guess, can hide, okay? But for the Akan speakers, how would you arrange these adjectives? In Akan, the noun has to come first. Now, I'm sure most of you raise sorry, I have no knowledge of Akan. So, where are the infants of Abbas? You can also convert this into chi. So a dan fufer. One could be a uncle. You see the sort of problems we try to resolve in linguistics. Now, in our initial study, we came up with these conclusions that age for Akan, okay, for Akan, age and color adjectives generally tend to occur closer to the noun, okay? And then if you have color and dimension occurring together, chances are that they could be interchangeable. And value adjectives tend to occur farther away from the noun. There is more work to be done on this, and hopefully once I throw off my Pro-VC wahala, I'll go back. Get up and dance. Why, you want more of it? Now, how many of us remember the song? I'm sure when you hear it, you laugh. I'm going to come, crew bluffo. But you see, the dilemma of the speaker, the person who said, I'm going to come, me yamaba, mokomaba, I'm not sure how to say it in Ebe, was actually grappling with a very serious linguistic phenomenon. And this is the phenomenon we refer to as serialization, or what I'm calling the I'm going to come phenomenon. Now, there are structures in our languages, virtually every language in Ghana and throughout West Africa, in Southeast Asia, Papua New Guinea, and a bit of the Americas. There are languages that have what is known as serial verb constructions. These are constructions where you chain verbs together. And here is a definition. I'm sure you don't need to bore yourself about this, but let me read it to you. It's a definition from Eichenbaum. A serial verb construction, or SVC, is a sequence of verbs which act together as a single predicate without any overt marker of coordination, subordination, or syntactic dependency of any sort. Serial verb constructions describe what is conceptualized as a single event. Now, in Akan or Infanti, here is an example. This is the I'm going to come. In Ghana, you say mi yamaba, but in Infanti, you say mo komaba. Now, how do you say that in English without introducing either a conjunction or some other form? In English, I suppose the best you say, I'll be back soon. Well, if you say you'll be back soon, yeah, you are here and you are telling me you'll be back soon. That presupposes that you're going to go, and that if you go, you will come back not too long after that, right? So we found a much easier way. Mi yamaba. Now, when linguists started analyzing this construction, there were all kinds of issues, there were all kinds of difficulties. How do you deal with this? But this has engaged, this is one of the concepts or structures in the language that has engaged my attention. Now, one of the things I have done is to, through the use of the prototype classification, argued for a prototype approach to looking at serial verb constructions, that some serial verbs are more serial verbs than others, or some serial verb constructions are better examples of serial verb constructions than others. Now, as a result of this, over the centuries that the language has had this, languages that have serial constructions, definitely Akan, have also developed what has been called lexicalization through serialization. Don't worry, you won't faint. I saw the director of medical services, and there are a whole host of doctors around. If you faint, they'll take care of you. Lexicalization basically means a word, okay, creating words or expressions. Now, take the Akan word, which the English word to forgive. That's one word. But in Akan and in a language like Ghana, you can't say that with one word. Now, if you speak some other Ghanaian language, think through and see, how do I say forgive in my language? Chances are that, most likely, you probably will use two words. So take gift or take give to forgive. And in Akan, a simple word like tell somebody, you use two words, catch it. Say show. A word like betray, you have to use two words. Yima, take, give. That's betray. Now, these are reflexes from our serial construction phenomena in our languages. And as I said, this has also engaged my attention as a linguist. Now, let me talk a little bit about grammaticalization. We'll be ending very soon, okay? So don't, I don't like talking for too long, and I won't keep you here for too long. Now, you remember I said that grammaticalization is a process where we develop grammatical forms, or those small words in languages, what we call grammatical words, from nouns, verbs, sometimes adjectives. Now, one of the things I've argued for, and I'm very proud about this, is that, generally it's said that our languages have postpositions and not prepositions, which is largely true. In English, we have prepositions. So you say in the house. So the in comes before the house. And that is why it is pre. But in our languages, or definitely in Akan, you would have postposition. So in the house, in Akan will be dano, that is house, the mu. Danu mu. So the mu comes at the end. That's why it's a postposition. And that's what you normally find in our languages. But I have argued that Akan has at least one preposition. And the preposition is wo. Now, if you take this sentence, the one in blue, akosia wo legon, the verb wo is the only verb in the construction. So it's a locative verb. But when you take another construction like, I met akosia at Legon, me share akosia wo Legon. The wo in this sentence is not a verb. It doesn't matter what you do to it, it won't fly. Let me try to explain. If you go back to the first one, akosia or Legon, one of the things verbs generally do in Akan is that you can negate it. You can have a negative form of it. Now this verb negates in a very peculiar way. So you won't say akosia en wo Legon. You would rather say akosia in ni Legon. But it's still a negation. Okay? In fact, you could sometimes stick something like that looks like the future form. Be, obeko, obedi, obeto. You can stick it on this. Now I remember one time I was talking to somebody on the phone, we were speaking Fanti, and the person wanted to come and visit us. And then she asked, let me say it in Fanti and I'll translate it. Basically she asked, would you guys be home this evening? But she said, home bowo fie enyimbiria. Home bowo fie enyimbiria. So that shows you that the word, even though it's not a very good verb, because there is a whole lot of things verbs do that you can't do with it. There are times when it can show some verbal properties. But when you have it in this construction, where there is a first verb or some other verbs before it, you can't do anything to it. So in this construction, you can't negate the word. So you can't say, menshia akosia in ni Legon. I didn't meet akosia at Legon. Now in Akan, when you are negating the verbs in a sentence, you negate every verb. That's one of the features of the serial construction in Akan. And so when you run all the tests, in this particular construction, what comes out as a preposition. In a preposition, preposed to Legon. Okay? Now, let me move to the third part of my presentation. This is where we'll talk about the cocoa and the cassava and the chocolate. Mr. Chairman, throughout my research, I have come to the conclusion that it is very critical for us as African linguists to adopt a utilitarian approach to the study of our languages. So we should study our languages in ways that ultimately bring direct benefits to our people rather than serving the needs of the global empires of formal theories. Now, I'm not sure about other disciplines, but linguistics is a very fashionable discipline because the theories change like every 5 years there is a new theory. And then we chase them, we run after them. And you realize that at some point, it becomes almost farcical because they would have left behind the core critical issues of language and be dealing with matters that are peripheral to language. And unfortunately, in the 60s and 70s and even part of the 80s, the theory that was developed by Chomsky held sway. So if you did research and you did not do it in that framework, it wasn't treated as proper scholarship. But sadly, Mr. Chairman, if you take a paper written in the Chomskyan framework in the 1960s or 70s on a can, and you give it to any of our students to read today, they will have absolutely no clue what the analysis is. So, as we say in our languages, did we go or did we come? And this is why I am arguing that we need to adopt a utilitarian approach where we study our languages as a whole, writing grammars, writing dictionaries, writing other works that have pedagogical relevance and implications. Mr. Chairman, essentially what I'm arguing for is a philosophical approach to our research that considers our essential needs, our basic needs as a developing people. In other words, we should let our research serve our developmental needs rather than satisfying some empire-building efforts from the global north, most of the time, by the way. Take a country that focuses a lot on developing cash crops, like cocoa. Let's face it, beyond exporting cocoa or turning cocoa into chocolate and various cocoa products, there is very little you can do with it by way of satisfying your basic human need of hunger. For those of us who grew up in semi-urban, peri-urban areas, where we've seen hunger before, getting a piece of cassava cooked and sprinkled with salt is enough to keep your stomach occupied and your stomach acids quiet. Now, if all you're doing is growing cocoa, go cook and eat. Now, I'm not saying that we should not engage in products that can be exported. What I'm saying is that we need to take care of our basic needs first, and then move on. Recently, I was in one African country for a conference, and somebody from that country was making a presentation about his own country, and this is what he said. He said, look, my country spends a lot of time growing tea, but every so often we declare hunger because we don't have sufficient food to feed our people. Mr. Chairman, this afternoon I intend to be controversial in some of the things I'm going to say, because, and I'm going to plead the inaugural lecture rights that at inaugural lectures you don't ask questions. And I hope Mr. Chairman will stick to that. You see, there is nothing like objective knowledge. Knowledge has a political dimension because the knowledge systems of the world are structured hierarchically. The knowledge systems of the world are structured hierarchically. Let me give you an example. If there were going to be two speakers, one is coming from Harvard and the other is coming from University of Benin in Dahomey or Benin. One is speaking in the Great Hall. The Harvard professor is speaking in the Great Hall. The professor from Benin is speaking, let's say, the Business School auditorium. Generally, by just a guess, who is likely to attract a bit more attention? The Harvard professor. That shows you that there is a structure, there is a hierarchy. And we need to be aware of that. Sometimes we are too easily caught in the grind of being there with them. But we wouldn't have taken care of our basic needs. So we talk about putting a laptop in every child's hands. That's fine. But the child goes home and there is no food. The laptop can't conjure up food for the child. So before we latch onto some high-flowing developmental agenda set elsewhere in the global north, let's sit back and determine what is critical to our needs. It's good. It's good we do away with pan latrines. I vote for it. But if you cannot guarantee the people who live in Choco 24-hour water supply, why do you tell them to do away with their pan latrines? Shouldn't we put in place a constant water supply so they know that they have no excuse not to convert to WCs? I'm not saying that pan latrines should stay. I'm just raising questions. So before we move with the flow and with the crowd, let's, as we say in Ghana, check our how far. Now, because in the heydays of Chomsky, if you didn't do work in Chomsky's framework, it wasn't considered scholarship. A lot of Ghanaian languages, a lot of African languages cannot boast of comprehensive grammars. And I expect somebody who knows better to prove me wrong. That in Akan, for example, if you went to somebody and you said, show me an Akan grammar book that is very comprehensive about the English, about the language. If you ask me that about English, I can show you 1,000,001. If you ask me that about Akan, chances are that I'll go to 1875, Christalla. Up till now, we have not been able to replace Christalla, the most comprehensive description of the language done in the history of the language. But we've written papers, we've written analytical papers, transformational generative grammar, principles, government and binding, principles and parameters, minimalism. We've written about those things using information from our language. Even up till now, the most comprehensive dictionary of our language goes back to Christalla. Have we taken care of our basic needs? And so Crowley, one of the linguists who believe that descriptive work is good work to do, says in many of these universities, that's basically talking about universities in North America and Europe, fieldwork-based dissertations in linguistics are sometimes discouraged as being too descriptive or as being insufficiently informed by theory. So you weren't encouraged to do it. And as a result, your language suffered. There's also the issue about validation, knowledge validation. Who validates your knowledge? And here is a quotation from a German political thinker, cum philosopher. Knowledge about development that is validated internationally, preferably through publications in North American or European journals, commands a higher status than work published in the developing regions of the world, often regardless of how relevant or closely connected it may be to the developmental problems of those regions. So there is the issue of validation, and we're always looking for validation. I was very surprised. Just this week, I learned that those of us in the sciences, our colleagues in the sciences, the journal Nature didn't have a peer review system till about the late 1960s. But now peer review is the thing. And now we are following something known as the impact factor. So we are all rushing to journals that have impact factor. And you go there and they tell you, well, your work, isn't the type we're looking for.